And we're back, folks, and it's time. Let's not waste any time. We are live at Studica. You can see our friends right there. We're going to do a deep dive of Ultimate Goal presented by Qualcomm. So say hello to our three presenters today. We have a first alum and the Ontario FTC head referee, Mickey Corneo. Hey, Mickey. Mickey.
You are going to be reading the questions to us.
And we also have first alum and winner of the first Canada Cross Program Volunteer of the Year Award, Kyle Lawton. Kyle's waving too. And first alum, the Ontario FTC lead FTA and control system expert, Jamie Sin. So, Kyle, Mickey, Jamie, take it away.
All right, guys. So we're going to do a quick walkthrough of the field. So my name is Kyle. I'm the lead field manager. We have Mickey, our lead head referee. We have Jamie, our lead FTA. So I'm going to start things off by doing a quick walkthrough of the field, talking about what we're going to be doing and how the game gets played out. So we'll start off with autonomous. So at the start of autonomous, you're going to be starting on the start lines, which are on the far side of the field from me. You have up to 3 game pieces that you can have in 3 rings that you can have in your possession, and you need to be contacting a wobble goal during that time. So the objective of autonomous is to take the wobble goals and score them into one of the 3 target zones that are laid out on the field in front of me and also behind me. So Jamie has moved one of the target goals into one of the wobble goals into one of the target zones. Another thing that you can do in autonomous is take some of the rings and launch them into the tower goals, either the high, the middle, or the low, as well as knocking over the power shot goals, and then resetting them at the end of autonomous. Another objective of autonomous is to take your robot and park it on the line, the white line in the center of the field. So now we're going to get into the driver controlled period. So one of the things that you need to do in the driver control period is take the rings and score it into the high, the middle, or the low. Any of the other objectives of putting the rings onto the wobble goals, putting the wobble goals outside of the field will not be allowed until the last 30 seconds of this 2-minute time. Once that last 30 seconds comes, you can then start to knock over the wobble goals, knock over the power shots. You can continue to score rings into the tower, and you can put rings onto the wobble goals and also move the wobble goals either back to the starting line or to outside of the field. So now we're going to just do a quick walkthrough of all of the different elements that are on the field. So we're going to start with the tower goal over here. So as you can see, there is a high, a middle, and a low. So you can place rings into the low. You have to launch rings into both the middle and the high, launching from behind the white line in the launch zone. So some of the quick dimensions are the height on the high goal is 5 inches and the width is 16 inches. The width for the middle and the bottom goal are going to be 23 inches wide and approximately 10 inches tall. The middle goal is taller than the bottom goal. So from the ground to the first lip is 13 inches. From the ground to the lip of the middle goal, we're looking at 21 inches. And then from the ground to the lip of the high goal, we're looking at 33 inches. So that's the main aspects of the tower goal. Now we're going to move over to the power shot and the return rack. So the return rack is from the ground up to the bottom of the return rack is 27¼ inches. And it is directly beside the tower goals on the inside. The power shots, we have a red and also a blue. They are from the ground to the metal frame, 21 inches. And when the post is out, from the ground to the top of the post is approximately 26 inches. Each of these tubes are 1 inch in diameter, and they are roughly spaced 4.5 inches apart. Once you're done, you can reset them with the bar in the back to bring the goals back out at the end of autonomous to reset to be ready for the end game. So now we're going to talk about some of the tape lines that are on the field. So each one of these target zone squares are 22 inches wide, 22 3/4 inches wide typical. They are also the inside diameter of each of the tiles from the tabs. So if you have a field that has the tiles, just put them on the inside of the tabs and you're good to go. From the wall up to the white line is 80 inches from that far edge, or approximately 3.5 tiles. And from the wall to the first edge of the target zone is 70 inches. To the second goal, we're looking at 94 inches to the front edge, and to the back goal to the front edge, we are looking at 117 inches. So those are just some of the rough dimensions of the field. Now we're going to take a look at the wobble goal and the rings. So the wobble goal is roughly 8 inches in diameter. It is from the bottom to the lip is 3 inches, and the total height from the bottom to the top is roughly 12.5 inches. Each of these goals do wobble quite a bit in all directions. They can support up to 10 rings before they start to fall over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If all the rings are off to the side, the wobble goal will start to fall over. Once you add that 11th ring,
they roll.
It will fully fall over. So it may be able to have more rings on it, but it can really only support 10 rings. That 11th will put it over its threshold and make it knock over. So each one of these rings are 5 inches in diameter outside, and they are 3 inches in diameter inside. They are roughly 3/4 of an inch thick, and they are made of foam, so they do bend and squish quite a bit when you're trying to throw those around. So now we're going to take it over to Jamie, who's going to talk about the field reset layout and the event flow.
So specific to this year, because we're doing remote events in Ontario, the teams themselves will have to do all the work that field personnel in previous years have done. So before you have a match run, you have to follow the field reset procedure. You need to remove any excess robots from the field, make sure that they're clear. You have to remove and collect all the excess game pieces that were used in the previous match. Then you follow the field reset procedure and set for the next match. Now, all of this is assisted using the FTC Cloud software. A little bit more on that in about an hour. But the general match flow requires you to clear the field down, make sure you have the correct amount of game pieces, make sure that the game pieces are in the correct spot, and set the robots up again. So you want to make sure that all of the power shot targets are reset, where the bar is at the back and that the tubes are at the front. You want to make sure that you have 10 rings, not the 20 rings that you would have in a full field. A remote event field has half of the amount of rings. You want to make sure that both wobble goals are adjacent to their start lines and that everything is set according to the field setup guide. So you want to take your robot after the field has been reset fully and place it in its starting position. You have the option of preloading up to 3 rings. Any not preloaded must go behind the tower. Once you have reset and set the field up and placed all robots, you then enter into the randomization phase. Once the robots have been placed and set, the drive teams may not touch their robots until the end of the match. Once everything is set, you will run the randomization. The set target zone, either A, B, or C, will be set. And the preloaded rings will either be 1, 4, or 0 in front. After that, the field personnel, a member of your team, will start the match and cue in the 3, 2, 1 countdown for autonomous to begin. So once the match is done, you've scored some rings, you've knocked over some power shots, you now have to score the match in FTC Live. We're going to show you how to do this a little bit later on. Keep in mind that what we will be showing you is extremely early release. We're probably the only place that you'll be able to see this today. Yeah. We got special access just to showcase this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mickey for rules review. You might want to pay attention to for remote events.
All right. So I have a couple rules that I want to go over, but I want to cover a little bit more about the game flow that happens. So once autonomous is over, you reach in and begin your teleoperated period. That's correct, right? And then you can touch your controls and start the actual game period. During that game period, you can launch rings from this zone. So you need to be within the white tape on this side of the field into the different goals that we have. So you have the towers, and then you have the targets. And then towards end game, you can put your rings onto the wobble goals. Before end game, you can't put them on. A couple rules that I want you to know when you go through the game is matches must be played when all members of the drive team are wearing approved eye protection and shoes with closed toes and closed back. So I understand that we're doing remote events this year, and there are your own guidelines that you have at your own field, but there are some that are specific to matches, and rules have reasons, and safety is a very big one. So this one, I definitely want to point out to everyone that you do this even though there's not going to be different volunteers and field personnel to talk to you and remind you of these rules. So wear your safety glasses, wear your proper shoes when you're around a field, and even if you're not. Another thing that can cause confusion is robots or scoring elements in 2 or more scoring areas. So that might happen while you're scoring a match and you're not sure how to score that. This rule specifies that a robot or scoring elements that are in 2 or more scoring areas earn points only for the highest value achievement. If the achievement values are equal, only one achievement counts as scored. So keep that in mind if you have that confusion when you're going through and scoring your matches. If your robot is disabled during a match, remember that a disabled robot is not eligible to score, earn points, or incur penalties. So if your robot gets disabled during a match and it's in a spot where it could incur penalties, it's not going to, it's just disabled. There are no match replays in remote events, and they are not paused. Remember that. Another thing within FTC that's nice to keep in mind is inadvertent and inconsequential. So robot actions that violate a rule may be ruled as inconsequential and inadvertent, so it might not be penalized. Another thing that might cause confusion when you're doing remote scoring is scoring elements in contact with the robot. Scoring elements in scoring areas that are still in contact or controlled by the robot for the scoring area have 0 score value. So if you are scoring on the low goal, which is the only one you can place rings into, and the match ends and your robot is still touching it, that doesn't count as scored because it's still controlled by your robot. So keep that in mind. Same goes for wobble goals. When you're contacting your wobble goal and say you're putting it outside the field, it doesn't count. A ring that's touching your robot and is on the wobble goal, if it's in contact with your robot, it doesn't count. So keep that in mind when you're scoring. Um, so um, during autonomous period, it's hands off the robot. There's a safety issue with that, and then there's a fairness issue with that. Is that autonomous is meant to be your robot acting by itself. So drive team, keep your hands off. You cannot directly or indirectly interact with the robot or the driver station during the autonomous period. Early stopping while the robot is running the autonomous code is not allowed, except if it's a safety problem, in which case you should really only be touching your e-stop. A major penalty is assessed if this rule is violated. Drive team contact with the playing field or robot. The first instance would be a warning, and the second instance would be a minor penalty. So don't touch your robot or the playing field during a match. So this is also, so say you do that during autonomous. Now you've got a major penalty and a minor penalty if it's after a warning, okay? Because rules can double up. And you're in charge of scoring this year, so you need to figure that one out. Drive team coach is driving your robot. That is a warning and then a major penalty. If you are wearing that, or if you've been decided that you are the coach for the drive team, hands off the controls, please. Removing game elements from the playing field. A robot may not deliberately remove game elements from the playing field during a match. If they fall outside of the playing field, they will be returned to the playing field. So if a ring accidentally gets taken out of the field by your robot for whatever reason, it's returned. And your field staff should do that. Your drive team should not leave their station to go get it. Illegal use of game elements. So say you're using the wobble goal to allow yourself a little bit more height or support when you're shooting a ring. That is a major penalty. Use the game pieces how they're supposed to be used. So wobble goal adding height, rings adding height. They're your game elements. They're not part of your robot. Build a mechanism to do what you want it to do. A robot extension outside the playing field. So you can extend outside the playing field to put the wobble goal in the drop zone. If you're extending outside any other part of the field and you contact something, that is technically a disable. So when you're a human player who is going to stand behind the tower goals, they can introduce the rings during a match, but they have to do it while maintaining specific rules. So if the human player introduces the rings to the playing field before the driver control period, so during autonomous, then it's a minor penalty. You can only introduce rings into the playing field using the return rack. So it's a little difficult to see because it's black on black here, but there is a return rack that's on the inside of each of the towers. And that's how you get the rings into the field. And that's the only way they can come into the field. If you notice, the rings roll, just as an observation point for everybody. You can't store the rings in the human player station. You must return them as quickly as you can. At a remote event, if you're hoarding the rings, you're literally only hurting yourself. So I hope you have that common sense. Human players and drivers, don't put your limbs into the playing field during a match. That's a minor penalty. Everything here is a minor penalty. Human players cannot reach into the tower goal to retrieve stuck rings when the robot is at least 24 inches from the tower goal. So if the robot is close to the tower goal, you can't put your hands in. Makes sense for safety, right? And if the rings get stuck, please use a tool to get the rings out. Don't hurt your hands trying to get it. Be smart about it. Okay, so that's all it is for the human player. Going back to the drive team, if you touch the robot or driver station after the field has been randomized, so as Jamie said, you put your robot down, you preload it, then it's hands off. And then your field personnel are gonna come and randomize the field. Then after that happens, you still need to maintain your hands off the robot stage, because otherwise you might adjust your robot so that you can get that autonomous, and your robot should be able to handle the randomization. And that's a challenge for you guys. So if you do touch your robot, it's a minor penalty, and the robot is not eligible to earn the wobble goal delivery score in the autonomous period. Does that make sense? Just a couple more rules, guys. I hope I'm not boring you. Launching of game elements. So you can launch rings during any match period, but launching rings over a boundary that is not the tower goal boundary will receive a minor penalty. So if you for some reason are trying to launch rings off of that side of the field or that side of the field or the one behind me, that's a minor penalty per ring. Try to shoot them at the goals, but remember, if it's inadvertent or inconsequential, it's up to your field personnel to decide if that penalty should be assigned. Wobble goals. Don't launch wobble goals. That's just not allowed. Major penalty is assessed for that, and it will not earn points for the period, so autonomous or driver controlled. Remember that end game is part of driver controlled. So when you put your rings on that wobble goal, if you have launched it somehow earlier in the driver period, that doesn't count. So just don't launch it. I'm sure you have other time to spend a mechanism, or to spend time designing a mechanism to launch something else. So once again, as I just said, you cannot place rings onto the wobble goals except during the end game. A minor penalty will be assessed for each ring. So don't start doing that until the end game. As I said before, a robot outside the launch zone, so anything on that side of the white line, that launches a ring is a major penalty per ring. And then the same goes, so if you're shooting at the towers or if you're shooting at the targets, you need to be behind this line. And that's all the rules I wanted to go over. What questions do we have?
All right, currently we got 4 questions. The first one is, do you need to shoot a ring to those middle targets, or can you use something different to hit them from a distance? Presumably, maybe we're trying to reference the spatula from the game animation with that.
Oh.
So it has to be rings as specified in the.
Right, but how do you, the launching method? Is it like shooting? Is it like
I mean,
throwing?
however you want to manipulate the rings is up to you. It just has to be rings that do it. And I mean, like, you can't be a person throwing it. It must be the robot.
I would hope a robot does better than that.
All right, next question.
Next question. The broadcast mentioned the rings are foam. Any recommendations on how to sanitize them? Can we use disinfectant wipes?
It's your field and your rings, so you can disinfect them how you wish. I would think, though, it would hold up to both of those things.
Yeah, I would avoid anything with ammonia in it, because although I don't know what this is made of, ammonia does not play nicely with mini plastics.
So what you could do, if you're not sure if your disinfectant is too strong, just use a little bit of it and then leave it for a day. And if it starts to destroy the rings in some way, don't use it.
I believe this one's more for Jamie. How do teams switch from autonomous to teleop?
During part of your driver control teleop setup on your driver station, you will be prompted to switch modes on your driver station by pressing a button.
All right. So, next question is, how much the robot needs to be in the launching zone when launching?
So for launching the rings, your robot needs to be fully contained in the launch zone. So that means your entire robot needs to be behind the white line. If any part of it is either touching or over the line, then that does not count. But Mickey can confirm that.
Yep.
All right. Do we have any more questions?
Oh, they keep adding them here.
Oh,
Excellent.
perfect.
Which parts of the field do we need for a remote event? Which parts do we buy and which do we build?
Yeah, so for remote events, there's two main objects that you're going to need to purchase. One of those is the wobble goal. This is due to trying to get the weight calibration and the wobble effect. So it's hard to kind of make that on your own. You don't know how much weight is in the bottom. The other object that you will need to buy are the rings. This is to make sure that all rings are consistent and that all of the remote events and remote practice events are using the same elements for these aspects. The other elements that you will need is some sort of tower. As you saw in the release video, they did have a cardboard tower and also cardboard power shots. But you can also purchase those as well as you'll need to have 10 rings, and that's what will be used during a remote event. So remote events are basically half the field. So you'll have one tower goal, you'll have one set of power shots, so 3 power shots total. You will be using 2/3 of the field. So across we have 6 tiles and we have 6 tiles. So for remote events, it's gonna be 6 long and it's only gonna be 4 wide. So you're only using 2/3 of the actual field. This allows you, if you have a current field perimeter, you have 4 corner pieces and you have 2 side pieces. You're not going to be using the other 2 side pieces.
Bit of a follow-up to that. Where do we buy the field pieces in Canada?
To my knowledge, you can purchase them from Studica. I don't know that off the top of my head, but Studica would most likely be the place to purchase them for Canada, as we are local.
Can you also get them off HandyMart?
I believe you can also order them off of HandyMart as well.
All right. So this question is, what if we make a mistake submitting a score online?
If you submit a score mistakenly online, we'll go into a little bit more depth on how to submit scores and whatnot. There is a mode where you're allowed to test and practice as much as you want before you submit your real scores, but you will have to declare that you're submitting a real tracked score before you start the match, so you can't just pick your best score. We'll go into more depth on the live scoring system because it is still changing. It's still in development. We have access to an alpha version of it. So we'll be showcasing some screenshots of that in the next session.
What is that next session, Jamie?
The remote event deep dive with Dave, myself, and John.
And which meet is that on?
Oh,
So going back, so you finished, Jamie. So check out that feed coming up, but we're still in the session. As for the question of if you can buy parts from Studica, James has some information to share on that.
Hi guys, I'm James. I'm one of the engineers at Studica. For purchasing courts, we sell full courts and the remote court off our website. The remote court comes with this if you buy the frame, or you can just buy the game pieces, which includes the full tower, 11 rings, and 2 wobble goals, which is a lot. It also comes with the nets if you would like the nets as well. For the remote competition, the frame will be missing the 2 middle pieces and a set of tiles, but it'll be enough to complete the remote event. If you would like to purchase, you can do it through the website, although we would prefer if you contact a salesman such as Derek at derek@studico.com.
James, so what if they wanted to get the absolute minimum of just like the wobble goal and the rings? Is that available?
So we haven't talked yet with IndyMart, but
Okay.
they will be able to purchase just rings and wobble.
Okay, so that's a yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but not at the moment, it seems like.
No,
Not from Studico.
yeah, it's the
We're
princess
working on
stuff.
it.
We're working on it.
So
All right, do we have any more questions?
Oh, plenty. Don't
Oh.
worry.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you
Perfect.
when we're done. First of all, we got a thank you, Studico in there
Yep.
as well. Follow up to that is, what is a court? Is that a field?
Yes.
Yes, a court is a field. So in FTC, they call the field a court. So that's just one of the terms that are used for the field that we are currently standing on is a court.
All right. So the next question is, why is Mickey on crutches? Sad.
Have fun.
I don't see the point in taking up much time on this. What really happened was I was working with my FTC team, and since there's no weight limit, they made their robot really, really heavy, and I wasn't wearing proper shoes when we were around the robot, and it ran over my foot, which is why you should wear proper shoes.
Wow, you
When
did that
you're-
all in an hour?
I did. I did it all in an hour.
Do we have any more questions?
Of course. Don't worry, guys.
Yes.
All right. Do we need to use field tiles for remote events, or can we run on our classroom floor?
Jamie, you know? I believe that you can run on a floor. They do recommend that you use tiles because there is a possibility that we could have provincials which will use tiles. So we recommend that you try to use the tiles as it will best represent what you will see if we do have an in-person event sometime in the future.
All right. How heavy are the wobble goals?
Maybe a pound and a half. They're very light. They're not very dense.
They're mostly made out of plastic. There is a little bit of a weight in the bottom, but as Jamie said, they are about a pound, probably no more than 2 pounds in weight.
Is there a way to ensure team can't build the tower with slightly larger dimensions?
Yeah, so once the field gets released from AndyMark and opens up on their website with all the detailed drawings, they'll have all of those specs put out. But the best way to do it is to probably order one of the pre-made sets either from Studico or AndyMark. But if you're in a pinch, you can get the cardboard cutouts. But we do recommend going with the official field version.
But as for if that question is saying if there's any penalty to having a larger goal that you build, that is gracious professionalism for you. We are trusting you to submit your scores, to complete your robot inspections, and to build your field according to the rules. As gracious professionalism is a huge part of FIRST, I hope you abide by that.
All right. Next up, we have, if blue wants to score on the right middle tower goal, won't they need 2 towers and maybe a full field?
Yeah, so the one thing that they're doing for remote events is you will only have 1 tower, but we're looking at the blue side. The blue high goal and the blue low goal will be the field color. The middle goal is actually also going to be blue, but will have the red pipes. So for a remote event, you're only using 2/3 of the field and half the game elements. And all 3 goals for a remote event will be of the same alliance color. Once you go to a full field and an in-person event, that's when you'll bring in the second tower, and that's when the middle goal will switch colors for the alliances.
All right. Never mind. I guess I almost spoke too soon there. Second to last question currently in the queue. Can we build our own wobble goals for remote events?
So for remote events, the 2 elements that you do need to purchase are the wobble goals and the rings. You cannot make your own rings or wobble goals, as trying to get the exact same weight balance and the same foam density are going to be really hard. So for remote events specifically, you have to purchase these 2 items at minimum.
All right. Next question. For remote events, Do we have to stand in the driver's station, or if our classroom is cramped, can we move around?
Mickey, you want to take that one?
According to the rules, you are to be in the driver's station. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So in the layout that you currently see now on screen, the driver station is going to be in front of us. The drop zone is off to the side where Jamie is standing, and then all the goals are over here where I'm standing. Do we have any more questions?
Yep. There's a repeat of the court and field question in there, which court is the terminology used in FTC.
Yep. So the court is also a field. They're a term that's used intermixed. For FTC, it is called a court, but you can also call it a field. They're used in and out.
All right. Next up, we have, can we put our field outside for a remote event to increase ventilation?
That is a great idea. I would keep in mind the effect that raw sunlight has on any sensors you have. Color sensors may behave differently. Ultrasonic sensors may be unaffected or may be affected, depends heavily on the type of sensor you have.
There is no rule that states you can't. Just be aware of how it affects you and your team and your robot.
Oh, this is an interesting one. How would you recommend drivers practice social distancing while driving the robot?
So for remote events, it is only one team, and the entire driver station is the entire length of the field, so that entire 12 feet. So for remote events, you could probably have your phone or your hub in the center, and then have controllers going away as far as the cables can reach. That's probably the easiest way, as well as your human player will be in the back, separated from the rest of the drive team.
Yeah.
So that's probably the easiest way. If there was an in-person event, it's going to be a little bit more tight, but there are still ways that you could social distance in those aspects.
For a remote event, you could be quite easily the distance that Kyle and I are apart.
In terms of your drive team, you're going to have a coach there. So you have your two drivers. For me personally, if you have to, I would put the coach further back. To me, if you put your coach over here or on a different area, you get an advantage from that, which isn't entirely fair. So I would rather, if you have to bend the rules, I would say stay on the same side, be further back, and you might be outside that line, but don't go to other areas of the field because then you gain an advantage, which isn't entirely fair. So if you have to bend the rules, safety is first.
Exactly. All right. Next up is there any computer equipment we need for remote events?
Jamie?
The only piece of equipment you would need is some internet accessible device, phone, tablet, computer, laptop, maybe even a smart TV. I haven't tried that one, but as anything that can access the online scoring page. If you don't have consistent internet access, like Ken was mentioning during the actual kickoff, you can use paper sheets that you record your scores on per each segment of the game, and then upload the scores later when you have a consistent internet connection.
All right. There are currently no more questions in the queue, so I guess we give it a minute and see if anyone pops anything in chat.
Yeah, if you have any more questions, just feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll get to answering those pretty quickly. What we can do in this time now is we can kind of walk through all the different field elements and quickly go through those just one more time, just so you get another look at the field. So again, we'll start with the tower goal. So as you can see over here, we have the red tower goal this time. So we have the red top high, we have the blue middle, then we have the red low. You can place rings into the bottom, but you have to launch rings into the middle and the high from beyond the white line. For a remote event, remember that this entire section will be red, including the middle blue colored rings. Next, we'll move on to the power shots. So these are 1-inch diameter tubes that get knocked over in autonomous. Just before endgame, about 10 seconds beforehand, you take the bar in the back, you push them forward, and now they can be used and ready for endgame to happen.
So who does that? Pushing it forward?
So the person who will push it forward will be the human player that will be behind the field and just standing off the side. They will reach underneath the netting if you have it, and they will just bump that bar forward and then pull it back. Next, underneath it, we have our return slot. It's a little bit hard to see. Hopefully you can see it on camera. We'll take one of the rings, and the rings get slotted in from behind, and they will roll all the way out, and they will go across the field. We'll take a look at the wobble goal. So again, this is the wobble goal, approximately 8 inches in diameter and 12.5 inches tall. The consistency of the wobble, they do wobble quite a bit, and they will continue to wobble for quite some time. They can hold approximately 10 rings until it starts to fall over, and the rings are 5 inches across, 3 inches internal, and ½ inch thick. So I think we have another question.
Another 2, actually.
Oh, 2 more questions.
Yeah, I know. We're hopping over here. Can teams be penalized if they're not wearing proper safety equipment during a remote event?
Mickey?
You can't start the match if they're not wearing proper safety equipment. So they can't be penalized because the match hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
All right, and that answered that pretty well. Next question is, are we allowed to feed rings directly onto our robot using the feeder?
Yeah, so you have to put rings in one at a time. Thank you. So rings have to be put in one at a time. If your robot was to be right in front, that is possible, but the rings do need to fall out by themselves, if I'm not mistaken. Your robot cannot reach in and grab the rings out one by themselves. It has to make its way out. But if your robot was able to catch them while they're falling, that's totally doable as well.
We've got another question here. Hold on, still typing.
Oh.
What happens if a ring gets stuck?
Yeah, so if a ring got, as you saw possibly in that last one, a ring did get stuck. So you are required to push it out with some sort of tool. I don't know exactly what that will be. Just some sort of mechanical tool, just so you don't put your hands anywhere into the field. You won't be able to reach in and kind of pull that ring out or get your robot to pull that ring out. You have to use some sort of device to push the ring out onto the field through the slot.
All right, we're all kind of on questions for now.
All right,
We have 5 minutes.
got 5 more minutes. Jamie, do you have anything to talk about related to the field?
Keep in mind that you will have to be doing all the scoring yourself. You'll have to do the role with the scorekeeper, the referees, as well as potentially the control systems advisors to fix your robot if it breaks. So
Can your driver also score their robot?
no, that is one of the interesting rules. You must pick someone who is part of the field personnel that is not part of the drive team.
Whoa.
This is probably self-explanatory, but it is mostly due to making sure that everyone is keeping a fair and unbiased view.
So does it have to be a student that scores, or can it be like a mentor or a parent? It can be. Okay, so it can be. It can be a volunteer from your community, as long as they're affiliated with the team.
Yeah. So just basically anyone who is not on the drive team. So your driver, your operator, your human player, or your coach. Those are the 4 people that cannot score the match. Anybody else can score the match.
All right.
Just remember your gracious professionalism while you do it.
Yes, I believe we have a question.
Yeah, we do actually. This one's a good one. Will there be help available if the robot isn't working and the team doesn't know how to fix it? A follow-up for me on that is, are there any resources you can recommend, Jamie, for that as well?
We're currently in the process of potentially creating a live help system. So that way the volunteers that we have for FTC in Ontario are able to give help to various teams that need it in a live kind of a chat environment.
Keep in mind that although we say live, everyone has lives and might not reply instantly in this imaginative thing that we're working on.
Live means not email.
Yeah, we'll try to respond as fast as possible. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to you within 24 hours.
Yeah, we're working on that. And for any lead mentors, stay tuned. We will hopefully be sending you some information about this. In the meantime, the FTC volunteer manuals, so the control system advisor, the first technical advisor, and the robot inspector manuals are all available for you to read. Going through the troubleshooting steps that they would go through would be a great thing to learn how to troubleshoot and fix your robot on the fly.
Don't forget field inspector.
Field inspector too, even though that they are double duty this year.
Yeah, well, for First Ontario, but different manuals.
So First Inspires has this great little resource area, and you can specify what program you want to see resources with. Check out the FTC ones. Don't be afraid to look in the volunteer ones, because that's where a lot of the resources that we rely on are. And that's going to be your resources now.
Not really a question, more of a statement. Someone has suggested sending out Jamie's phone number for robot triage.
I get enough texts from enough people at First Canada saying, fix my computer.
All right, we got.
Yeah, so the main communication will be with this online
Imaginative thing that we haven't figured
that
out.
online program that we're trying to put together and we're trying to work on. We won't be giving any of our personal contact information. So all the information and everything will go through that
So stay
chat. So stay tuned on that. We'll probably be sending out some stuff, as Jamie said, to lead mentors, hopefully fairly soon.
All right, looks like they want us to wrap up.
All right.
So, there is one last question. You guys can answer it in a couple seconds.
Let's do it.
Speed, go.
All right, is there a way to make sure you're scoring properly in a remote event? What if you do it wrong? Which I think we partially covered earlier.
If you do it wrong during an actual event, please try to let someone at First Canada know, ideally Dave Ellis, and we will see what we can do to correct that.
And if you know you made a mistake, don't be afraid to reach out and say you made a mistake. Don't hide it. We're here to help, and we're not going to hold it against you.
Everyone makes mistakes.
All right, I think that's it from us. I guess we're passing off back to
All right,
Patrick now.
I guess we'll
Excellent.
send it back.
Have fun, friends.